Moving day. That one moment everyone dreads, when you have to pack up and get everything from one place to the next. You upend your life, go to a completely different place and rebuild everything from the ground up. Like when your job decides that you'd be better in Denver, then a month later needs somebody to take over the Baltimore gig. Then you spend a few years there and they decide maybe Chattanooga's a better fit. Only for them to realize that you didn't have any of the certifications needed for that job to begin with, so they send you back to Baltimore 6 weeks later. And then a month after that, you get blacklisted because of somebody else's screw-up, but they needed to cut payroll and you were a good scapegoat. And then you find yourself stuck in Houston right where you started. Thanks, Comcast. Now imagine going through all of that only with thousands of people and your neighbors that are going to be hostile. That brings us to today's topic, the Thyatian colonization of the Hinterlands. As soon as they pacified that nation, they started busing. Now how to turn that into adventure opportunities. Welcome to Mystara. I'm Mr. Welch, and what has Thyatian ever done for us? I have done a video on the Hinterlands, and this picks up years after that last bit of information was provided. Very quick recap. The Hinterlands are fantasy Gaul. As of Dawn of the Emperors, they were getting their teeth kicked in by Thyatian. In the canon timeline, as well as the 1005 timeline, after the war with Alphatia, Thyatian completes the conquest, with the 1005 version happening a few years in advance. The region has a serious continuity problem, with Dawn giving us a region similar to France, and the Princess Art turning it into a thick jungle. The tribe names also change in both versions. All of that's cosmetic, as in both varieties the Hinterlands are conquered. This video was largely helped by the Vault's articles on it, but I couldn't find the author's name, unfortunately. The invasion of the Hinterlands starts in 988 AC, when Thyatian legions acquired several beachheads on the northern section of the land. They first encountered the Raven tribe, who did the bulk of the early fighting compared to, well, everybody else. The Raven tribe couldn't stand up to the superior tactics and greater numbers of the Thyatians and were forced to surrender completely around a decade later. The Empire, rather than going after the rest of the tribes, first shored up their position and began to establish their presence in the captured lands before conquering the rest of the nation. The start of the colonization began when Thyatian started sending over administrators and merchants to help manage the conquered portions of the Hinterlands, starting with the city of Ravenscarp. Then as the armies progressed further into the land, the support personnel established forts and then towns around those locations. After several years, Thyatians began moving into the hinterland towns, establishing local control and dealing with the natives personally. After each town was absorbed into the imperial territory, then came the engineers who began to Thyatian-form the area. The Thyatians do love their entertainment and comforts, and you couldn't be considered civilized unless you had at least the bare minimums of distractions. Arenas were the first to go up, and gladiatorial combat and races were started. Then amphitheaters came, and the Hinterlanders were introduced to their first plays and similar entertainment. In a matter of years, half of Ravenscarp's buildings resembled more what you would find in Hadius than in the traditional architecture. Cities were uniformly paved, and plumbing was introduced for the first time. While the nation was being conquered, the Thyatians were changing the face of the Hinterlands through the creation of the roads. As one settlement after another fell, engineers were laying bricks down between them. Prisoners of war were used for some of the work, but they were supervised by experienced Thyatian legions who were old hand at this backbreaking task. In a matter of months, you could tell the Thyatian portions of the country from the free sections just from where the roads were paved. This was a great improvement in the life of the natives, though they didn't appreciate it at the time. But as the years passed, trade greatly increased among the conquered tribes, and the great markets that were an annual show now occurred bi-monthly. Then Thyatians started forcing their own economy into the new territory. Before the invasion, tribes primarily used barter as their main source of trade. The Thyatians introduced their currency and made it common throughout the various cities. The coins were largely made from metals mined in the region, with the addition of the justicar or the electrum piece. The precious metals here were often found in the form of silver and gold alloys, and rather than try to refine them, the decision was made that electrum would be used as the most common coin instead. Now, Hinterlanders use the same coin in their local villages that are used in Ochilia, Corindus, and on the Isle of Dawn. This allows them to be taxed with greater ease, something they aren't happy about. But the land has prospered because of the economic improvements, something that even the most rebellious elements would have to acknowledge. One act that did more to ease the transition of the Hinterlands into imperial control was the Emperor's decree that anyone who voluntarily joined Thyatian would be granted immediate citizenship. With the war very obviously going against the clans, many villages and settlements accepted the inevitable and accepted the offer. This almost doubled Thyatian's control of the nation and hastened the conquest, as it also claimed most of the farmland in the process. This gave the legions more men to conscript, which even further increased their number. The Raven Auxiliary was the first legion raised, but it wouldn't be the last. Once a unit from the land was finally trained, they were shipped out of the area to a different part of Thyatian for their tour. The last thing the Emperor needed was freshly raised legions to rebel against their commanders. This saw numerous Hinterlanders shipped to Hadius, the imperial territories in the Isle of Dawn, for patrol duty, as well as maintaining the infrastructure. Thyatian troops were brought in to replace them, resulting in a sizable shift in the demographics of the region. Several villages were left with few men of fighting age during this time, only for Thyatian soldiers and settlers to take their place. In several of the cities founded within the nation, the Thyatian population eclipsed the number of Hinterlanders living there. Another aspect that Thyatys was quick to introduce into the conquered territories were the aqueducts and plumbing. Before their arrival, sanitation in the Hinterlands was primitive, with most waste just washed downstream, with well water making it the majority of their fresh water. The Thyatians brought with them advanced sanitation, which allowed the cities to greatly expand, and now the Hinterlanders are concentrated in greater numbers than ever before. This has also increased the agricultural output of the country as the Thyatians have expanded the irrigation. As long as the farmers pay their taxes, their conquerors are happy leaving them alone to till their crops. In the 1005 timeline, the biggest event that altered the attitudes of the Hinterlanders towards the Thyatians was the conquest of the Tiger clans after the war with Alphatia. Emperor Eusebius needed to replenish his depleted coffers, and only one nation was rumored to have enough gold for his needs. The Tiger clan of Etrugan fought against Darican in the Shires, but suffered badly during the conflict. Because of the terrain of the area, Hinterlanders were used as the primary troops. When they returned overburdened with captured gold, many of the warriors that had fought against Thyatys swore allegiance in hopes of riches abroad. Now many Hinterlanders are trained in the method of the legions, and this has caused many of them to gain the mentality of Thyatians. Thyatys has introduced multiple schools that are now common in most cities and villages, with children born since the conquest taught the empire's language more than their own. Since the Hinterlanders had no written language, all the books they have access to are in Thyatian. There is an effort to preserve the old language, but through immigration, education, and trade, more people speak Thyatys in the region than they do the tongue of the Hinterlanders. And there doesn't seem to be anything stopping this change. So what's the point of the colonization? The Hinterlands aren't exactly rich in mineral wealth, and since the imperial decree has made most of the population free citizens rather than slaves, there's not an interest in buying and selling people. The colony is profitable. If it wasn't, the concessions to the Hinterlanders would have never happened. What it does have is neighbors. Neighbors that are either isolated, sparsely populated, and or mineral rich, which means they are now the primary target for Thyatian expansion. The empire can't expand in Brune. The nations they border are either allied or will spark another war. The Isle of Dawn isn't a good target for expansion. Neither of the two great empires are looking for another round. That leaves Devania. Directly adjacent to the Hinterlands in the west is Imerond. This is a nation of plant-like humanoids that are numerous and their lands are very well protected. They could withstand a Thyatian assault, but for how long would remain to be seen. They would probably be offered a chance to join as a protectorate, something they would be loath to do, but it might be inevitable. Surrounding Imerond are various city-states of differing stabilities. Many are former colonies of other nations, such as Millennia, Hool, or the lost Oltec people. Most would fall in quick order to a dedicated attack, and even the more prepared ones, such as Mavosia, would only last for so long. If the Thyatians spent enough resources, they could claim the northern regions of Devania, though holding an expanse of that size would be difficult in the long run. The conquest of the Hinterlands more than likely signals the death of their culture, at least as they know it without Thyatian influences. Colonists are starting to pour in from the continent, and the empire has populated unsettled regions with many of the veterans of the Hinterlands auxiliary. Eusebius has made it a point to relocate the various tribes to Hadius to settle the interior, as a way to dilute the power of the storm soldiers that once controlled it, and as a way to ensure he has troops loyal to him in the region if the thought of rebellion ever crops up again. One aspect of the colonization that is rapidly eating away at Hinterlander culture was how quickly they were accepted into Thyatian society. The empire loves all things exotic. Now they have a new race of tall, fair-haired individuals that are arriving in numbers on the mainland, and it intrigues them. Gladiatorial stables pay well to see a Hinterlander fight, and many of those have taken up the profession. Their habit of fighting alone, plus their larger size and different appearance, has made many of them quite popular with the crowds. The more primitive and exotic-looking the Hinterlander is, the more likely they are to find a sponsor with the Thyatian nobility. It's become a fad to hire them as security for parties or even guests of honor to show off the host's wealth. They are expected to be in full war paint and act like savages, like how they're portrayed in most of the festivities. If you have characters that are getting their domains from Thyatys, the Hinterlands during this conquest is a great place to start. Think of it as southern Norwald with less frostbite and more woad, or jungles if you want to go with that version of the terrain. The conquest of the land is fairly quick, but the assimilation of the people won't be. There will be quite a few people upset about their new Thyatian neighbors, much like the start of the Grand Duchy of Karamikos, but the Empire is already splitting the realm up into new territories, with the Hinterlands already labeled as an exarchate, with baronies scattered throughout. Once these territories are fully established, then the next conquests can start. That's the colonization of the Hinterlands. It's an interesting look at the process and how Thyatys is reversing its fortunes. The land is being civilized as the characters watch, and they stand to benefit if they join in, or they can lead a rebellion. Your game, your rules. Next up is a look at another monster from the Savage Coast. The Mythoan folk, a tiny, cute and cuddly bear-like creature that's so rare it's almost legendary as status. And pretty obviously inspired by Quickie Koala. Until then, land, sea snatch.